Since the dawn of time, man has had many unanswered questions. What is the meaning of life? Why is it 42? If the ocean is so big, why won't it fight me? 500-foot RMC T-Rex when? But still, there lingers a question that for the longest time went unanswered until now. Are math and science related? Roller coasters are your answer to this question. Welcome to Coaster Mania. I'm Micah, and today we're answering the next question on this list. What is a roller coaster element, and what types are there? Just like in wizardry, in order to brew up a good roller coaster, you need to combine a lot of elements. Once these elements are combined, you need to shake it all up, and then voila, a roller coaster. Some of these concoctions are more exciting than others, and some are less so. So what is an element? An element is a specific section of a roller coaster that consists of lateral, longitudinal, and/or vertical movement along the track. Some elements are designed to prepare the roller coaster for the rest of the course, and some serve to prepare the roller coaster for the end of the course. Any part of a roller coaster is an element, and each element can be made up of multiple smaller elements. To make this video easier to follow, I'm ordering the elements based roughly on when you might encounter them in a layout. So pull down your lap bars, fasten your seatbelts, and get checked on into this video. The station. This can often be where the mood is first set for a roller coaster. The station is where riders load onto a train and where ride operators perform their restraint checks.
All aboard!
Stations come in a few different forms, but in most cases, this is the main purpose they serve. Most roller coasters have a station in which riders simultaneously load and unload from the train. Most modern stations will have what are called air gates, which are designed to prevent oncoming riders from stepping out into an unsafe area. They are also often equipped with a main operator's panel in which many of the ride's controls are hosted. Here, the head operator can watch over the progression of a train through its course, can monitor the block zones, and also check for any fault codes the ride might show during regular operation. These panels also often contain information that lets the head operator know that all restraints are in a safe, locked position, and that the train is safe to dispatch onto the course. Some stations will come in different forms, such as dual stations. These will often have two loading platforms side by side. This allows twice as many trains to be sent out onto the ride course without much sacrifice. In order for a dual loading station to work, there needs to be switch tracks before and after these platforms, which allows both trains to merge onto one singular course. The next iteration of station type is the combination of the loading and unloading platforms. If a ride has separate loading and unloading platforms, this means that in one station a ride temporarily stops while riders leave the train. After all riders have left the train, the now empty train moves onto the loading platform. This design is intended to speed up the dispatch process by removing one step for ride operators to worry about. Both the dual loading station and separate unloading platform designs are intended to increase the efficiency of a ride crew, while also increasing the overall throughput of a roller coaster. The first major part of a roller coaster you'll come across on the course is a prelift. This section can also sometimes be called a pre-launch section. This can be as simple as a turnaround into a lift hill or a launch, or a straight section of track also leading into the lift hill. Sometimes roller coasters don't have a pre-lift or launch section. A ride like Fury 325 at Carowinds is one of these. Its track leads straight from the station into the lift hill. Sometimes rides might have a significant portion of track before a lift or launch. Depending on how long this is, it might honestly be worth just calling this segment part of the overall course. A great example of this would be the section before the first launch on Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. This ride features an elongated pre-launch section that is made up of many other elements. If you ask me, some of my favorite pre-lift sections are found on roller coasters built by Rocky Mount Construction. These often feature many small hills that give quick jolts of airtime that feel straight out of a kiddie coaster. Not all RMC coasters have these wacky pre-lift sections, but some of our favorites do. Mainly present on roller coasters with heavy theming, a ride portal is often a theming element that leads into the main ride course. One notable example of this would be the lead up into the dome on Space Mountain at Disneyland. Another good example of this would be the lead up featured on Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. These elements serve a similar function to pre-lifts sometimes in that they are designed to serve as an introduction to the ride and its story. Feeling up for lift hills? No? Okay, let me try again. I don't trust lift hills. They're always up to something. I'll stop now. Lift hills are one of the most common methods that roller coasters use to turn potential energy into kinetic energy. By granting a train enough height, it will have enough speed from the combination of gravity and mass in order to navigate the rest of its course. Some lift hills are driven by chains, while others can be driven by drive tires. A less common form of lift hill are pulled by cable. The main idea of lift hills, as stated before, is to pull a roller coaster to the highest point on its track in order for it to build up enough speed for the rest of the course. Because of this, a lift hill is generally the tallest point on its course. If a roller coaster also has a launch, this can potentially shake this last part up, but we haven't really seen that happen yet, at least not a whole lot. If you watch my video on roller coaster safety systems, I went through and explained that roller coasters with a lift hill will have an anti-rollback mechanism to stop the train from potentially navigating the course in an unintended manner. These are what make that signature click-clack sound on a roller coaster. With chain-driven lift hills, there is often a motor at the bottom which is powerful enough to pull it all the way up. At the bottom of the lift hill, you may often see sprockets which are designed to reduce the load required by the motor in order to lift the train, which often weigh several tons. Sometimes on smaller, more family-oriented rides, you may find what are called tire drive lift hills. These usually have sets of tires on the left and right side of the track that press up against flag plates on the bottom of the train in order to push it up the lift hill. Sometimes these can be found on larger scale roller coasters, but it is less common to see this. Moving on to cable lifts, these are more often found on roller coasters built by Intamin. The purpose of these lift hills is to propel a train up a lift hill much faster. The thought process behind this design was to shorten the length of time a train spends on the lift hill, meaning that subsequent trains can be sent on the course on quicker intervals. They often consist of a cable, tensioning system, cable motor, and finally a cable dog. All of these elements work together to move a train up the first hill rapidly and with less energy spent. Due to the increase in efficiency of newer chain lift motors, as well as innovations in the designs of chain lifts, roller coasters are often able to ascend chain lifts much faster nowadays. Cable lifts are less prominent on newer coasters simply due to their added complexity and overall shortcomings. Lift hills come in many different shapes and sizes, but most of them are angled anywhere from 20 to 60 degrees up. In some cases, such as with rides built by Gerstlauer, rides can feature vertical lift hills where the lift faces straight upwards. Also, did you know that not all lift hills go straight up their first hill? There are some coasters such as the Jetstar 2 model by Schwarzkopf that actually feature spiral lift hills. These often use tire drives and were thought to be a thing of the past. With the opening of Zambezi Zinger at Worlds of Fun, it seems that we're potentially seeing the rebirth of this style of lift hill. Launches, like lift hills, come in a few different flavors. To make this easier, I'm going to break them down into two main groups: magnetic and mechanical. Magnetic launches, as their name implies, use electromagnets to propel roller coaster trains along the track at great speeds with little to no moving parts. There are two main types of magnetic launches. These include linear induction motors, or LIMs, and linear synchronous motors, or LSMs. Telling the difference between these launches is a topic I'm saving for a later video, so stay tuned on that. It would take a whole video diving into how magnets work, and that is not a quick topic to explain. LIMs are a little bit more common to find premier coasters of old, while LSMs are a lot more common to find on modern roller coasters due to their increased efficiency. Moving on to the different types of mechanical launches, there are hydraulic launches, air launches, tire drive launches, and flywheel launches. Technically there's more, but these are the main ones that you'll most likely come across. Each of these mechanisms use different methods to launch a train along a track. Some of the most powerful forms of roller coaster launches include hydraulic and air-powered. Many of these are fairly self-explanatory on how they work. Tire drive launches, similar to tire drive lift hills, use a series of tires on the track to propel a train forward. Hydraulic launches use a combination of high-powered hydraulics to accelerate trains to great speeds in very short distances. Similar to hydraulic launches are air-powered launches, using air pressure to propel trains at high speeds. The final method I mentioned was flywheel launches. These were more common on older roller coasters, such as Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm. This launching method used heavy weights in combination with a flywheel to push a train at great speeds. Launch technology has been one area of roller coaster engineering that has seen the most technological advances over the years. Mechanical launches used to be far more common. This is somewhat shifting with advances in electromagnetic technology, leading to LSM launches being far more common nowadays. On a final note, sometimes launches and lift hills can be combined. A great example of this is found on Maverick at Cedar Point. The coaster uses LSMs to launch up its first hill, which very much has the profile of a lift hill. Most of the time, launches take place on flat segments of track, but in some cases they are used on slanted or sometimes vertical portions of track to propel a train over a hill. So get this, we're about to make it into the first drop, the most exciting part of your favorite roller coaster. But first, you might need to conquer the pre-drop.
No!
Pre-drops are drops that happen right before the first major drop on a roller coaster. These are sometimes also called tester hills or trick hills. One of the more common pre-drops you might find are on older B&M coasters. These elements were implemented in order to assist the chain lift mechanism in not causing too much shock on the motors when the full weight of the train is released. You see, roller coasters with chain lifts have a motor and a tensioning sprocket in order to keep the chain nice and tight on the track while the train is going up the lift hill. When the coaster reaches the top of its lift hill, this tension is released and can sometimes be pretty violent. A pre-drop is designed to prevent that. The first drop is hopefully quite simple to explain. This is the first instance in which a roller coaster goes, well, down.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, SpongeBob!
Sometimes a first drop can be quite shallow, like on a family coaster, whereas they can sometimes go vertical or even beyond vertical. First drops come in all shapes and sizes and aren't always located after a launch or a lift hill. Going back to a previous example, Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City features its first drop right outside of the station. Oftentimes, a first drop usually refers to one of the first major large drops on a roller coaster course. While you might be able to say that the pre-lift section of Wildcat's Revenge at Hershey Park contains the first drop, most people would say the drop right after the lift hill is the first. First drop, best drop, sometimes. First drops are also not always straight. Fun fact, did you know that on most inverted roller coaster models built by B&M, they feature a curved first drop? This is done since if they did drop straight down, the bottom of the train could actually collide with itself. Since the bottom of these cars is above where your feet usually are, this would ultimately lead to a very uncomfortable situation. In some other cases, roller coasters can have a set of brakes at the very edge of the first drop. These holding brakes are purely designed to build anticipation, generally for drops that are perfectly vertical or beyond vertical. These holding brakes not only scare the pants off of most riders, but can also prove to be intimidating for people walking by the ride. Every great rise must come to an end, or the bigger they are, the faster they fall. What goes up must come down. One of these days I'm going to make a big break into the comedy scene. But like roller coasters, when I do go down, I've got to pick myself back up. This is where valleys come into play. If a roller coaster didn't have these, it wouldn't have hills. That might not be all that fun. A valley is fairly simple in concept. It is roughly a U-shaped segment of track that can lead a coaster back in an upwards direction. Or sometimes it can be an overarching low point on a roller coaster. Most of the time, if a roller coaster doesn't immediately rise back up out of this low point, it may not be called a valley. In some cases, valleys may be broken up by different elements in the middle of them. This might be something small like a bunny hill, or even something else. With great valleys come even greater hills. Mahatma Gandhi. Trust me, he said that. I witnessed it.
He's right. Do you know that?
Surprise, surprise, hills also come in many different shapes and sizes. You've got airtime hills, bunny hops, camelbacks, double downs, double ups, top hats, and finally, speed hills. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my video on roller coaster forces. That video may help out in regards to some things I'll be mentioning here. To start, airtime hills are a broader category of hills that are all designed to give the rider a feeling of weightlessness. A roller coaster will pass over these with enough speed to be able to lift riders out of their seats at the apex. Bunny hops are very small hills that are commonly found on coasters built by RMC. These hills sometimes come one after another, giving riders multiple strong pops of airtime. Camelbacks sometimes come in sets of 2 or more and are a form of airtime hill that are often large in size. They often have very parabolic shapes to them. The shaping of these hills are designed to provide airtime to riders for as long as possible. Usually, camelbacks are great at providing tons of floater airtime, although sometimes they are stronger and provide mild ejector. Double downs and double ups are both very similar. The only difference is where they're placed in relation to a hill. Double ups feature an upwards incline that is interrupted partway through where the ride levels out somewhat, then another rise up. A double down is the same thing except in reverse. These elements can be great at providing quick and aggressive pops of ejector airtime and are a personal favorite of mine. Moving on to a much more classy variety.
I am eternal.
Top hats are often found on launch coasters. These often feature a vertical or near vertical ascent up, and the same thing on the way down. These can be found on rides such as King Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure and Storm Runner at Hershey Park. The final variant I want to cover are speed hills. Think of these as bunny hop's distant cousin. Speed hills often stay somewhat low to the ground and showcase the huge speed a coaster might have. These hills do a great job at providing a ton of ejector airtime while allowing the coaster to maintain most of its speed. In order for a roller coaster to be a complete circuit, it probably needs at least one of these. You see, roller coasters operate on more than 2 dimensions. This is where turns come into play. This might seem like it's going to be one of the more boring sections, but hear me out. Turns come in such a large variety that they make hills jealous. Turns can be flat, positively banked, or negatively banked. They can also ascend or descend. On flat turns, riders often feel strong lateral forces, almost like when you drive your car around a turn a little too fast. Bank turns alleviate this force and turn the lateral g-force into positive g-forces. This makes for a much more comfortable experience for riders on high-speed turns especially. Finally, negatively banked turns are mainly featured at the tops of hills and are designed to make you feel like you're being tossed out of your seat in more ways than one. Another key type of turn would be the simple turnaround. These are most commonly found on out and back style roller coasters and make a turn of at least 180 degrees. These are often at the farthest away point in a ride's layout. Now that we've conquered talking about the basic main types of turns, let's dive into some more specific types. The humble helix is our first special type. These guys allow a roller coaster to slowly ascend or descend while also covering a lot of track in a small amount of space. An easier way to envision helices is with spirals. A roller coaster can travel in a full 360 degrees or more with a helix. These are often fun on roller coasters with longer trains as they allow riders in the front of the train to see the back of the train and vice versa. Another great thing about these is that on downward helixes, these allow roller coasters to pick up speed, meaning that they inflict stronger positive g-forces on riders the longer they go on. Turns come in other shapes and sizes too.
Really?
To list the types of turns you might see more frequently, we have overbank turns, elevated turns, fan curves, hammerheads, horseshoes, and finally S-turns. Overbank turns are often featured at the tops of hills and feature banking greater than 90 degrees. These are often placed on a ride's layout as an exciting way to get the coaster to change directions while not inflicting potentially dangerous forces upon its riders. Elevated turns are elements in which the track turns and either ascends or descends simultaneously. This is different from a helix in that it isn't generally in the shape of a spiral. Fan curves are most commonly found on wooden coasters and are turns that feature spokes that converge on a central support column. These are more traditional turns that feature a more visual flair to them. Next, we have hammerheads. These were named after an aerial acrobatic move with a similar shape. Hammerhead turns ascend up, feature a sometimes overbanked turn around at their highest point, then coast back down into a valley. These are frequently found on B&M hypers such as Candemonium at Hershey Park. Horseshoes are fairly similar to hammerheads. The main difference is in the shape. More often than not, they feature turns that are banked at 90 degrees, so it almost looks like a flat turn tilted straight up. These are commonly found on spinning coasters. S-turns are some of my favorite types of turns. These switch from turning left to right or vice versa. These elements give that awesome feeling of going through a slalom on a motorbike. My favorite instance of this is the double S-turn found on Cheetah Hunt at Busch Gardens, Tampa. I'm going to be doing a separate video on just inversions because these elements, well, there's an insane variety of these. To touch on the basics, there are 4 main groups of inversions: loops, corkscrews, rolls, and combo inversions. Loops are vertical inversions that look like the loops you find on shoelaces. These go up, flip upside down, and come back down. Most of the time these go straight up and down, but sometimes they can be tilted. A vertical loop is a lot like a helix, but vertical.
Well, duh.
Corkscrews and rolls are very similar, but the former are much more spread out. Corkscrews were first designed by Arrow and quickly became a common element on their custom looping coasters. These elements resemble the spread out helical shape of a corkscrew. These elements are often the smoothest part on Arrow coasters and quickly gain prominence in rides by other roller coaster manufacturers. The next type of element I'll be mentioning in this video is rolls. These come in the form of barrel rolls, inline twists, zero-G rolls, and more. These are defined by their often more linear twisting shape. Rather than being spread out spiral like a corkscrew, these are often centered on the heartline of riders. To prepare you for the next major video in this series, just know that a majority of the other types of inversions out there are combinations of these 3 main types of inversions. You can think of a lot of them having at least half of one style of inversion and combining it with another and sequencing it differently from there. I had a hard time of thinking where to put these elements, so I figured I would give them their own category. I'm going to describe these as I go.
Gentlemen, start your engines, brothers!
First, we have the trick track. This usually features a section of track that is banked in one direction, then banks in the opposite direction. Trick tracks can be over a level piece of track, or over a couple of bunny hills. These are often designed to give the sense that the roller coaster is quote-unquote falling apart. These next two are both mainly found on RMC coasters, at least for now, but more manufacturers may implement them as time goes on. The first of these elements is the fabled trick track double up. This mouthful of an element is found on Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom, and is a double up that banks one way on the first hill and banks in the opposite direction on the second. I couldn't get away from this video without mentioning this next crazy element, the quad down. Found specifically on Lightning Rod at Dollywood, the quad down is what you get when you combine two double downs, one after the other. This element gives 4 separate pops of airtime and feels completely relentless. The next element is the banked airtime hill. Sometimes these are over a straight airtime hill, where the train banks to the left or right. In the case of some other coasters, you have what is called an outward banked airtime hill. This is featured on rides like Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point and Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa. These elements combine an airtime hill with an elevated curve. At the apex of this hill, the coaster banks negatively in the opposite direction of the turn. This element inflicts laterals and strong airtime on riders and feel completely out of control. Wave turns are where you have a bump in the middle of a turn. These elements tilt riders to the side and act like a sideways speed bump, often at the apex of an elevated turn. They provide an insane feeling of sideways airtime and are often a favorite element for many riders. The next one are high fives. These are specific to dueling coasters and stand out due to the fact that it makes riders feel like they can almost high-five riders on the opposing train. These often go over a hill and tilt riders inwards towards each other. These can sometimes ride like a banked airtime hill, but are elevated by the dueling aspect. You still hanging in there? We've still got quite a few to go, so why don't I give you a bit of a break? Let's try classical music this time. Welcome back. Now let's get confused with our next two elements. The first is the non-inverting vertical loop. These look very similar to a normal vertical loop, but just before they're about to flip riders upside down, they do a half roll at the top and keep riders upright, then roll back down into the downward portion of this loop. Junior Immelmans are next. These elements are a lot like regular Immelmans, but only roll 90 degrees to the side, then continue into the opposite direction. Don't worry, in the video where I'm talking about inversions, I'll tell you what an Immelman is. Next, we have the treble clef. This element is in the shape of a musical tool with the same name, at least when you look at it from the correct angle. This is a prominent element that is featured on Fury 325 at Carowinds. These elements have a coaster spiraling upwards and function as a turnaround mixed with a helix and a camelback. Next is a simple one, tunnels. Some roller coaster designers still like playing Dig Dug, so they add tunnels to their rides from time to time. For a little while there, Tremors at Silverwood held the record for the highest number of separate underground sections on a single roller coaster, dipping into tunnels 4 separate times. After tunnels, we have one of my other favorite elements, splashdowns. These are a visual treat for bystanders. A splashdown is when a ride dips into water and creates a large splash around the train. Rides like Diamondback at Kings Island feature funnels on the back of its train to scoop up water and launch it up into the air. These are also extremely common on the many different water coaster models. Moving on, we have Stengel dives. Named after their designer, Werner Stengel, this element starts out as a camelback hill, then transitions into an overbank to one side and returns to the ground with an elevated turn. Next, we have vertical spikes. These are usually found on shuttle coasters and are an element that a coaster travels up partially, then comes back down. Most of the time, these are found on Intamin Impulse coasters, as well as coasters with a switchback element. More on that one later. Finally, we have vertical spirals. These are also most often found on the Intimate Impulse model and are like barrel rolls on a vertical axis. These elements turn riders a full 360 degrees while going up, down, or both through a vertical section of track. Near misses are a category that can sometimes be contained within other elements. For instance, crossovers. These are featured prominently on wooden twister coasters and are elements where one segment of track, you guessed it, crosses over another. You can find this element in abundance on rides like Thunderhead at Dollywood. Next, we have the flyby. This is an element that can sometimes be found on dueling coasters. It is an element in which opposing trains race towards each other as if playing a game of chicken. This is most prominently found on Lightning Racer at Hershey Park. Finally, we have head choppers. Whenever you're riding a roller coaster and it feels like if you raised your hands you'd hit them on the support structure or some other element, that's called a head chopper. These elements receive their gruesome sounding name due to the less stringent laws regarding safety for designing coasters back in the early 1900s. This meant that taller riders would not be allowed on some rides due to some fatal accidents. Just kidding.
Got him!
Yeah, wow, okay, we actually sometimes get kind of dark here. Sorry about that. Head choppers, as I mentioned before, give riders the sense that collision is likely, but in fact are not. These can come in the form of anything that sits above the track that is close enough to provide the sensation. And no, you're not actually at risk of hitting anything. Roller coasters need a way to slow down and stop. It's not exactly comfortable to play bumper cars on a roller coaster track, or so I've heard. As mentioned in my video talking about roller coaster safety systems, brakes come in many different forms. The ones we want to focus on for this video are the mid-course brake run and the final brakes. The mid-course brake run is a segment of brakes often toward the middle of a roller coaster's course that is designed to add at least one extra block zone. The purpose of this is so that another train can enter the course once the first half is cleared. Sometimes these can double as trim brakes in order to govern the speed in which trains can traverse the rest of the course. The final brake run is located at the very end of a roller coaster's course and are often featured before entering the station. Nearly every roller coaster with a complete circuit has these. Some of these slow you down gracefully, while others can slam you to a full and complete stop. Either way, we like them. We're glad they work, and we hope it stays that way. Right, guys? Most of these last elements I wanted to mention feature things like moving track pieces. These elements include switch tracks, switchbacks, drop tracks, tilt tracks, and finally, elevator lifts. Switch tracks are pieces of roller coaster track that either move or rotate to a different position to redirect a roller coaster along a different section of track. Next, we have switchbacks, which also include a piece of switch track. Often, a switchback features a vertical spike in which a train travels partially up, then upon its return goes to a different portion of the course. Moving on, we have drop tracks. This element will stop a train on a straight segment of track and, similar to a drop tower, move the track downwards. This can sometimes be done quickly to simulate the feeling of falling and is often a very fun element. The next item on our list are tilt tracks. Currently, only a few coasters exist that feature this element, so it is a rare one indeed. Being similar to a holding brake, the train comes to a stop at a section of straight track after the lift hill. This whole section of track swivels in a downwards facing position and then releases the train once the track is connected to the rest of the course. Fortunately, there is at least one of these potentially opening up in the US in a few short years, which will be called Circuit Breaker. This will be located at Codaland in Texas. And finally, last but not least, is the elevator lift. This is a type of lift hill in which a roller coaster train is hoisted up vertically to its tallest point. This can be found on rides such as Cannibal at Lagoon and Cobra's Curse at Busch Gardens Tampa. I hope it has become apparent by this point, but a lot of elements tend to be a combination of multiple other elements. This is especially true in the world of inversions, but for non-inverting elements, it is still an ever-present concept. I tried to cover as much as I could with this video, but I may have still missed a few non-inverting elements. If I did, feel free to list them down in the comments below. I also wanted to mention that as this year comes closest to an end, I want everyone to know that I am extremely grateful for all the support I've received so far. I receive a lot of really nice comments, and trust me, I read every last comment left on my videos. It takes at least a little bit of effort for some of you to actually write those comments, and I'm so grateful for it. So thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a like and comment below and hit that bell icon. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters Nathan Martin and Future Collective. $1 a month helps me bring even more content to you guys, and I even have some exclusive content coming, so check it out. Check the description below to find links to the rest of our pages. Thanks for watching the video, and ride on, Coaster Maniacs!